Hi, it's Kate Brownfield from ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please like, comment, and share as it'll help others find the ADHD Kids Can Thrive podcast. I really do appreciate your support. My guest today is Lisa Lightner. She is a special education advocate and an IEP parent herself. She created a resource for all parents who are navigating 504s and IEPs called adayinourshoes.com. Please enjoy our conversation. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining me today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this. Okay, so let's just begin with if you could just tell us a little bit about you and how you became a special education advocate and what you do with adayinourshoes.org. Right? Is it .org or .com?
It's both, actually, which I can explain.
Okay.
Sure. So I'm Lisa Lightner. I have lived in southeastern Pennsylvania for most of my life in suburban Philadelphia area. My first child was born in the 2000s, and at about 8 or 10 months of age, we got his diagnosis. He has a duplicate chromosome, rare condition. And so we got, I kind of entered this world. I didn't know any different. He's my first child. So he started receiving services actually at 6 months. And he started going to a special needs preschool at 3, and they sent home some information on advocacy skills and things like that. And I just said to my husband, like, hey, we're going to need this knowledge because it was an expensive program. I don't want to name it, but it was a very expensive program. It was $2,000. And I said, yeah, this is a lot of money to us, but we're going to use this for 20 years. Like, because I was just, I was overwhelmed at that point. By the time he was 3, I had another baby. So I had a baby, I had a toddler, a disabled toddler at that. And I mean, he had an IEP at 3. So, that's what we did. And then from there, I had been teaching at the time. And from there, I just parlayed it into a job. And I had to do some volunteer hours as part of my training. And that volunteer experience turned into a part-time job. I did that for a little while, and then I just went out on my own. I had a different blog at the time about frugal living and couponing and things like that. Kind of a little fun fact about me is I am one of those crazy coupon ladies, or used to be. I used to do that extreme couponing thing. I thought it was fun. So I had a blog about that, and an advocate friend of mine was like, oh, I want to start a blog about advocacy. And I was like, well, hey, I have a blog. I know how to do that. And so that's what we did. And she didn't want to do it after a few months. She thought it was too much work. But I really loved doing it. And really very early on, if you remember in the 2000s, a lot of moms were writing blogs, and they were kind of like that memoir, storytelling, sharing your life experience kind of thing. And that's really what it started out to be. But because she and I were both advocates, we would always add in like a teachable moment, you know what I mean? Or whatever we had learned or something like that. And instantly, like, that's what people started coming to the site for. And we knew that because we were the only ones doing anything like this at the time. And they were like, oh my gosh, like, just explaining, like we would explain a story with the client, of course, not saying their names or anything like that, but using it as a teachable moment of, if your child gets suspended, this is what you do, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden we had all these parents coming at us saying, oh my gosh, my child's getting suspended all the time, and things like that. So that's really how it evolved. That's adayinourshoes.com. At this point, it has, I think, 650-ish articles. All kinds of things, all kinds of like lists of resources, lists of accommodation ideas for various skill deficiencies and things like that. It has IEP goal ideas. It has a huge IEP goal bank. And then adayinourshoes.org, because I also own that domain, I keep that as just kind of like a hub where you can see where I'm going to be speaking, where I'm going to be offering training and things like that.
Okay.
So that you don't have to weed through this whole giant site to say, what does she have going on right now?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the .org is more like what you're doing professionally with your own advocacy efforts. And then
Yes, because
the
I have,
.com is
yeah,
more like a searchable kind of, if you need to get yourself educated a little
right,
bit or a lot, you can
right.
go
Or
to
you're
the
just
.com.
asking, like, I don't know, like what are some strategies for, like, one of the really popular ones I have is it's tips and how to, if you think your child needs a one-on-one aid or a one-on-one para, how do you get that added to your IEP? And it's a giant article, that you have to kind of muddle through because it's a big decision, it's a big deal. But that's kind of like the type of information that you find on my site. Whereas on adayinoourshoes.org, I'm speaking for the Learning Disabilities Association of America. I'm speaking for them, with them, whatever, next week. I have a couple of things coming up on executive functioning with some other guest speakers and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's
just
tremendous.
what's
So
going
you
on.
have found your place in this world, Lisa.
I have. You know what? And I really enjoy it. In 2015, my son started having seizures, as we knew he might. He had a very high propensity to developing seizures. So at that point, I mean, he went from like 0 to like 100, in a matter of weeks, once they started. So we've had a very difficult 6 or 8 years, very difficult, multiple brain surgeries, and a lot of struggles and a lot of just a lot of seizures. I mean, he sometimes has, dozens a day, but as a result, that doesn't make me it doesn't make me a very good employee. I'm a very good employee. I'm not a very like reliable employee because I have to tend to my child often.
Right.
I have to go get him at school. I have to, do all these different things. He has a lot of appointments. So owning my own business is, it's offered us a freedom and an income that, moms like us need.
Yeah, and some flexibility. Well, I appreciate all that you have done. You've been a wonderful resource over, I'm trying to think, 23 years, right? You started
13.
13. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
great. It's
Yes.
great. I've watched you grow and expand over the years, so I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so this podcast is focused on kids who have ADHD primarily, and that comes with all kinds of friends for ADHD kids. They can have all kinds of things going on, like learning anxiety.
Right. It rarely travels alone.
It doesn't travel alone. So it's very important. I think when you get a kid who is struggling, you will find as a parent, if you've never been down this road before, that you have to get educated about IEPs and 504s and learning how to advocate and work with the school to support your child so they can get through with their well-being intact is kind of the overall goal. Okay, so a lot of parents have a question. When a parent suspects their child is struggling with the learning at school, what steps should they take? What do they do?
So the first step that I always offer, especially to moms, but also, to dads too, is always go with your gut. I think women in particular, that we're talked out of our gut instincts quite a bit. And this is an area where I find like ADHD and dyslexia, I think often like the most gaslighting of parents, and oh, he's fine. Oh, he's fine. He's a joy to have in class. He's doing fine. He just needs to pay attention. He just needs to do this. He just needs to do that. So listen to your gut instinct. And if things aren't going well, don't do the wait and see. Don't take the, oh, he's just fine. Keep pursuing it and open the communication with your child too. School, for the most part, is supposed to be an enjoyable experience, right? Like, it is work. It's work for kids to go to school, and I get that, but it shouldn't be this drudgery, this torture, this experience that just turns you into like a ball of anxiety at the end of the day, where you completely come home and have to, like, you just completely lose it, right? Because like we've all had these like jobs that we hate, and you go to the job and you hate it so much, but you just kind of endure it, and you endure it because you need money, and you go home, and at the end of the day, kids can experience that too. It's just
Yes.
school for them. It's not work. So listen to your child, go with your gut, and then, just follow the process. And that means doing everything in writing. So if you're going to request evaluations, it has to be in writing, not just this little chit chat in the doorway when you're picking up the child. That does not count.
Right. That's huge. Right.
It is huge, because then, 3 months go by and the parent thinks like, well, geez, why wasn't my child evaluated? And the parent says, or, the teacher says, well, you never requested evaluations, and you're thinking you did, but if you didn't in writing, then you didn't.
Right. And does that writing need to go to the teacher, or does it go to the principal?
Either or.
Okay.
Either or. It should be the teacher's responsibility to forward it to whoever handles those things.
Okay.
Per IDEA, anyone, but especially teachers, are actually encouraged to refer kids for evaluations. I think the climate out there is just that doesn't happen too much anymore. That teachers actually make those referrals. It's almost always parent driven at this point. And that's just kind of where we've gotten.
Yeah.
But also, I've heard from parents who have teachers who desperately want that child to be evaluated, and they're dropping these big hints of, well, maybe you want to request some evaluations, or maybe you want to request some assessments. If you're hearing those kinds of things from your teachers, yes, put those assessments in, put those requests in for assessments, because for whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable doing it, but they, that's kind of like their way of telling you, like, yes, they agree with you. That
yes, listen to those flags, right? Coming from the teachers. Why are the teachers so soft spoken? Why don't they just take action and get the process going? Why are there these little like soft flags?
Teaching has become such a hostile environment. It's just unfortunately where we are. I mean, it's part of the reason why they're leaving in droves, right? Like, nobody gets into teaching to make a kid's life miserable. They get into teaching because they want to help kids. And then they're stuck in these jobs where you're actively discouraged. I mean, I honestly have a friend, her husband is a teacher. I don't, of course, not going to say her name, but many years ago, he told me that they were out and out just told in a staff meeting, hey, we can't be evaluating all these kids all the time. Stop referring them for evaluations, just RTI them.
What's RTI?
Response to intervention.
Okay.
It's just kind of like a lower level program, like, with a lot.
Handle it.
Yeah.
Just try to do the best you can. Okay. Yeah. So that's good to know. Okay.
I mean, I think that scenario, I think that's happening a lot of places.
So. Yes, I agree. And I think there's a lot of this gaslighting you call, or soft selling. So I think parents, when you're getting into this, does the school get to dictate how they support your kid? Is it like this push down dictation, or does the parent have this right to provide input?
Parents are an equal member of the IEP team. Parents have mandated rights. They're in your procedural safeguards. They're in IDEA, as far as you have to be invited to IEP meetings and things like that. However, and this is, I talk with my legislators actually a lot about this. It's not equal, because it comes down to the school is going to present you with their final offer of FAPE. So you can go back and forth, on email or at these IEP meetings or whatever it is. At a certain point, you're just going to come to an impasse. And I've been there myself. I was fighting for a certain kindergarten placement for my child. District was offering something else. I wanted something. And at one point, the special ed director just looked at me and he said, look, I'm just telling you, like, this is our final offer of FAPE. This is what your PWN is going to say. So they get to kind of offer that to you. Now, yes, you do have rights for dispute resolution and everything else, but that's also a very unbalanced system.
Right.
So,
okay.
It's kind of like a gray area.
Yeah. Okay. And so I've heard parents say, like, when you get into, maybe before you get to that impasse, I think it's like, how do you just nag at the school to get, I think some parents' strategy is just to keep calling and maybe escalate that inside a school system, or just to nag and just bug them to try to get them to cave. But what would be the right strategy for a parent like that who's super frustrated and not feeling like their child's being, they see their kids struggling at school and home, and so the plan isn't working. So
Right.
how do you get that plan to to create a better plan?
It comes back to that documentation piece. Just document, document, document. If there are incidents at school, write them down. Keep a little notebook in the kitchen to just document incidents, or email them to the teacher. If for whatever you're requesting, if it's bullying, for instance, and you're trying to get this bullying handled, and they're, no, he's fine, we don't see it. Whatever it is, you want to have that documentation on paper that says that the child needs that support or service.
Okay.
From there, I would request it once in writing. I would meet about it if it's warranted to meet about it. And then they have to provide that to you on a PWN if they're not going to provide it.
What's a PWN?
A PWN is a prior written notice.
Okay.
So if a school district wants to make any change to FAPE, so if they want to change the IEP at all, or if they refuse to make a change to FAPE, so if the parent requests a change to the IEP and the school district is refusing to change that, they have to provide that to you in writing. So let's say you have a whole bunch of documentation as to why your child needs a one-on-one for focus and attention and staying on task and things like that. You would have a whole bunch of documented incidents. I would do that with the written request that this be added to the IEP. And then again, meet about it, yes, no. If they refuse to give you that one-on-one aid, they have to send you notice in writing why they're refusing your request. Parents don't know this little thing. It's called the PWN. I have a very large article about it on my website about how to use it effectively. But pairing that with a parent concern letter in the PWN is really the most effective way.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
I think just constantly emailing, constantly nagging, calling. I even had a parent tell me one time, like, well, I'm just going to request an email or an IEP meeting every week until they say yes. Like, well, no, if, they have to provide you in writing why they're not going to do it. I can go into the weeds really quickly.
But I think it's really helpful to know, because it's like parents just don't know what to do, right?
Right.
It's like you get into this cycle.
What makes the PWN so powerful in my mind is that it's very easy when you're in an IEP meeting and you're sitting there and you're surrounded by 10 of your coworkers and mom is there by herself. It's very easy for me to look you right in the eye and say, oh, let's just wait another 6 months and see how this goes. Which means you've just been
very
told no.
intimidating, right?
Right? You've just been told no.
Yes.
It's very easy to say no in person. It's not so easy to write it down on a PWN form and list the reasons why you're saying no.
Okay.
Because you're essentially telling, you have to spell out everything for the parent. Why are you refusing this request? And they have to write that down on the form.
Okay, that is fantastic advice. I even think, because a lot of parents actually, if they have ADHD kids, they may have ADHD themselves, right? And I do think just have, and you're not, if you don't have, didn't go to get an education in IEPs, right? Special training, it is helpful to see it in writing. It helps you process what's going on, right? And
yes,
and internalize what's happening. So that's great advice.
Right. And with any of these conditions, ADHD, dyslexia, any of them, so many of them are genetic. So yes, the parent often has the same condition and often has the same school experience. And they think that school is supposed to be hard and that school is supposed to be a struggle and you're not supposed to like school because that was their experience.
Yeah. Or there's this feeling, which I do think, that school's gotten harder or more structured. There's more, I don't know, the academic load seems higher than it was.
That's interesting, because I feel like it's not as challenging.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it's all this at least around here, it seems to be there's a huge focus on the standardized testing and not much else.
Well, yes, there's a lot of test taking. And I do live in California with where it's just there's this spirit that everyone's going to a high-end college.
Mm.
And so that's the train that every kid is expected to be on.
Yeah.
So that makes it tough. Okay, so another question I have for you, Lisa. At what point should a parent consider bringing in a special education advocate or even an attorney? Where is that line?
When you reach that impasse and you get that final offer of FAPE, right? The school has given you their final offer of FAPE. It's the IEP. This is what we're offering you. You have to decide what you're going to do, right? Are you going to accept that, or are you going to use your dispute resolution options? At which point, yes, if you're headed down that path, I would look into an advocate or an attorney. There just aren't a lot of advocates out there, and it is a very labor-intensive business. One client takes a lot of your time, because even though we have more experience with it, and I can read an IEP and comb over an IEP probably easier than most people, it still is a lot of work.
Okay.
And so we can't serve as many people as we'd like to, because there's not enough hours in the day. And since most kids are going to be using this for 10, 15 years, I would recommend that you look to your parent training center, look to other advocacy courses and things like that, because, it's certainly easier and more cost effective to do it on your own.
Right. Right. And use your website, I would say.
Right.
To get the education and the kind of some resources that you can use to help work with the school and your child. Yeah. Okay, so Lisa, the ever-ending question is, what is the difference between having a 504 for your kid and an IEP? What's the difference? Why would a child need one or both?
Great question. They are governed by two different laws. One is obviously governed by Section 504, and the other is IDEA. 504 plans are accommodations only. There's no progress monitoring. There's no goals. Okay, those are the two big ones. And the parent is not a mandated team member. I feel that they have less teeth. I have advocate friends who disagree and say, no, you can get them enforced just like you can an IEP. Also, with an IEP, I mean, both have their own dispute resolution procedures. 504s now, like, they were never intended to be an IEP light, and that's what they're being used as. They were intended to be for the person who just needs accommodations, right? Like, think of the child who maybe has juvenile arthritis and needs to use the elevator key and needs whatever extra time in the hallway to get to and from classes. Like, these kind of minor accommodations to be able to access your education.
Right.
What they're being used as is like a junior IEP or an IEP light, to kind of pacify parents, satisfy parents. They're a quicker and cheaper way to
say you're accommodating the child.
Yeah. Well,
and when you look at ADHD, I mean, I look at the 504 can accommodate the attention piece, if you will, to be able to sit in the front of the classroom or stand up in the back, whatever somebody needs to help them focus, get up, go to the walk around for a minute and come back. But if you're struggling with learning, that's not going to address all
exactly.
The things
it doesn't teach. Accommodations don't teach. And that's where I think as science and medicine and just our knowledge of things like ADHD have evolved over the past 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Like, we know more about ADHD than we did 25 years ago. So 25 years ago, okay, you give kid more, you can get more time on a test. Well, I use this example on my website. Like, you could give me a week to change a tire on a car. I don't know how to do it. If you don't teach me how to do it, the extra
I could have all the time in the world, right?
right. Or you can retake tests. Like,
Right.
okay, but if I don't know how to change a tire, I didn't know how to do it the first time, I'm not going to know how to do it the second time. And, like if we want to bring it back into ADHD, a lot of the accommodations accommodate for a lack of executive functioning skills. But what are we doing to teach the executive functioning skills?
Do schools teach that? I don't think
don't laugh. You're not supposed to laugh.
I know. I'm sorry, but
I know.
Why don't they teach that? They should,
right.
But yeah.
Right. But that's what I see is all these accommodations to help a child with their lack of executive functioning skills, but no one's teaching them the skills.
Yeah.
And as far as behaviors, I'm seeing 504s and sometimes even behavior plans that are basically trying to snowplow the environment for the child to not ever trigger them, rather than actually teaching them coping mechanisms and teaching them emotional regulation, which is what we need to be doing, because we can't snowplow our kids for the rest of their lives, right?
Right. Yep.
So that's just the thing. I just see 504s being really used and overused and abused in that manner, that they're accommodating or, writing down accommodations, but they're not teaching the skills that kids need. I see it's a sin. All the 504s I see for dyslexia, when a kid is never going to learn to read just by being around fewer kids.
Yes, I know.
That's what they do. They say, oh, we're going to put him in a small group. No, he needs a specific reading intervention for his type of dyslexia. He doesn't just need to sit around fewer kids.
Right. And with dyslexia, with an intervention, you can learn how to read. Mm-hmm. It really is not like impossible.
Right.
Yes. And I did hear, Lisa, in one state, if you're not reading by third grade, they just hold you back, as if holding you back is going to suddenly make you a reader.
Right.
Okay, parents. So there's a lot sitting on your shoulders, but it is worth it to advocate for your kid and get the accommodations in place that they do need. Lisa, I did want to.
And I would say, but to your point about the whole third grade thing, like just repeating isn't going to teach them to read. The same thing I would say for parents who say, like, okay, I'm really overwhelmed by this whole IEP thing. I'm overwhelmed by the 504 thing, whatever, ADHD. We don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. If you don't speak up, your child is going to get left behind.
Yes.
They are, because teachers have too many kids. They have too many responsibilities and not enough hours in the day. And, aides and paras, funding is being, cut and everything. You have to speak up. You have to.
So Lisa, why don't the schools just evolve into just a more accommodating place? Is it the standardized testing that's kind of screwing everything up, like teaching to this test, which is national?
I think there's two reasons. I think one is that our schools have been underfunded for 50 years, and that's having a cumulative effect. And so, that's how the problem starts, is with no money. And then it just kind of then that's just becomes they feel attacked because they do want to help your kids, and they're constantly being told that you're not helping my kid. You're not, my kid's not learning, I'm upset, my kid's upset. And that's kind of demoralizing for them, because that's not why they got into this job. So then that just kind of becomes the climate of this contentious, atmosphere.
Yeah.
But they don't have enough money. They don't, they haven't for 50 years. So.
Okay. So Lisa, what would be your words of wisdom, knowing that this is the situation with getting an education for kids and they're struggling? You've kind of tapped into this a little bit, but what would be, as we wrap up, your words of wisdom for parents?
Commit to learning the process. It's something that your child is going to use for their entire academic career, because even if they are on that college path, they're going to, they very likely may need accommodations in college. So you're going to need to shift a little bit. The process isn't exactly the same, but they're going to need some assistance, maybe advocating as an adult. So just commit to learning the process. It's not fun, but it's kind of like, once you turn 50 and you got to get a colonoscopy. Like, I don't want to do it, but I don't want colon cancer either. So, so we'll go do it. Or a mammogram or whatever, whatever, name another unpleasant medical test. It's just something that we have to do. And once you begin to learn the process and your knowledge base grows, as your knowledge base grows, the process feels easier. I don't want to say it gets easier, but it feels easier because you're like, oh, okay, I know what to do now. I don't feel overwhelmed. I know what to do. And then, I always encourage parents to get involved on the political level, whether it's your school board or, with, like, say, the legislative arm of the various disability agencies. They almost all have a legislative arm to them. And pushing change that way. I don't know that it's going to happen in our lifetime, but, and lastly, there's always what I call the path of least resistance. And that is, if it's easier for you and you have the means to do it, I know that schools have to provide FAPE, which is free and appropriate education. But if you can afford private services and you can do tutoring after school or hire an executive functioning coach or one of those things, and your family has the means to do that, it's an option,
Right. It may mean extra resources.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that that's not fair. And you're not holding the schools accountable. Well, we're also in a situation where a lot of parents like you and I, when you start to have older kids or teenagers or whatever, then you're, some of the families I work with, like, they're caring for aging parents, or they're dealing with the spouse who has cancer, or going through a divorce or joblessness, all these different things. So not everybody has the fight in them all the time to fight the district. And if you don't want to fight the district and you have a different way out, consider it. I think we can just get so narrowed in this, like, my IEP should say this and it should say this, and I get that. But if you have other options, just look at all the options. There's scholarships out there for different agencies. There's, all kinds of different things out there.
Yes. Be resourcely, right?
Be resourceful. Ask your insurance company what they might cover. Some might cover different things. You never know.
Right.
You never know.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. You were a wealth of information.